Everybody, and welcome back to the final speaker session of SheetsCon, the afternoon session here with Steve Webster. Now, just a few little things before we get started with Steve's talk. It was really exciting to see so many great and productive conversations happening in those sessions that we ran for the last hour. So thank you to all of you who jumped in there. Hopefully you got a ton of value from that. We have some more swag bag winners to announce, so let me do that right now. So congratulations to Atul L from the UK, Kristen B from Virginia, Hans T from California, Jonathan L from Pennsylvania, and Alexander J from Oregon. So congratulations. There's going to be a t-shirt and some stickers, swag bag on their way to you soon. And these t-shirts have been pretty popular over the course of this event. I can just show you again quickly. I have a spreadsheet for that. It's a good motto, I think. And so what we've decided to do is actually just open them up to actually buy one at cost. So we're not making any money from that, but just to, if you wish to, you can go ahead and buy them yourself. So there's actually the variant that I wore yesterday, which is the blue t-shirt with the SheetsCon logo, and then this spreadsheet one as well. Both those links are going on the reception page and in the sidebar chat. So if you do fancy a spreadsheet t-shirt, just to make your inner nerd happy, then go nuts and grab one for yourself. Great. So I'm really excited now to welcome Steve Webster up onto the stage with me. Really delighted that he's here to speak at SheetsCon. Steve has founded and runs a G Suite and AppScript development agency and has been doing this for years and years and years. Is one of the most experienced professionals in the field. He's built several extremely popular Google Sheets add-ons. He has been a huge figure in the add-ons community as well. He used to run the old add-ons G+ group when we all had G+. So I'm really excited to hear Steve talk to us today about add-ons. So please ask all your questions about add-ons and AppScript that pertain to add-ons in that sidebar for Steve. I'll gather them all up to join Steve again at the end for a Q&A session. And Steve, I'm going to hand over to you now for your presentation. So thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Let me share. Okay. Okay, Ben, can you confirm with the text that you can't see my screen okay? And assuming that you can, this presentation is available right now via that bit.ly link that says add-on slides. So you could either open that up now or just follow me as I share my screen. So I'll assume that you can see my screen and let's move on. So the agenda today is going to be more pro tips than getting into the meat and the potatoes of add-on development and publishing and reviews and things like that, because honestly, it takes more than 1 hour to do all that. So I thought instead of attempting to go through that in a rush manner, that I'm going to take the approach of a few things. So I'm going to give a brief background about myself and my company. I'm going to share up front some add-on resources. We're going to go into some of those. And then I want to get right into start explaining why add-ons are a good fit for certain problems that we can solve. And then, as I mentioned, there's add-on pro tips. So this is where I want to spend most of my time on with everyone today, because since there is good documentation, since there is an active forums and things like that available to get help, as well as some paid help if you need it, I want to spend most of my time on pro tips. Okay, so I'm a former Google vendor. Currently, I'm a Google product expert, and I've been recently nominated for the Google Developer Expert Program, like Ben is, so hopefully I'll be one soon. I've participated in the early access program for add-ons actually 6 years ago. And now, let's see, one other thing too. I believe Martin Hosky shared that how his first blog post was way back in the day. Well, I actually decided to look it up, and my first guest blog post on the Google Developer blog was actually back in March 2011. That's amazing. Regarding my company, I've had a soft launch for quite some time, but I've actually formalized the company last year as an LLC in the state of Florida. So SWGAP specializes in custom software services, support, training, and product development for Google's G Suite productivity software. But we also help out people that may have that great idea for an app that they may want to monetize. So we do help people with minimum viable product methods. So that's what we do. And I'm located in Lakeland, Florida, which is between Tampa and Orlando. I do have a team of folks. I have a director of services, Eric Schwartz, a software engineer. I'm actually hiring now for more of a help desk, low junior level engineer as well. I just brought on a training manager part-time. Hopefully she'll be full-time soon. And another part-time trainer and product expert as well. And I also have agencies in India that I rely on, as well as South America and Colombia. Okay, now Google Add-Ons. I want to first, right off the bat, if you're not familiar with the online documentation, it is very important to know that from the get-go here. So here's a link that goes to the app script. And then once you're there, they actually have an add-ons option. And they've moved the documentation to its own website, which is here, but you can get to it there. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. Guess I zoomed in too much. Here's the add-ons. If you click that, it takes you over here where it's now dedicated. Let's go back to the presentation. So again, I don't want to spend a lot of time of trying to train you on everything regarding what's already online. I'm taking the position that you will explore and ask questions on the forums, which I will share links to at the end. But I do want to get into it a little bit. So what are add-ons? You can read that for yourself, but basically it's a way to interact with the G Suite productivity software in a couple ways. And when I say a couple ways, there's actually two types now. The G Suite add-ons, that's the newest generation of add-ons. I'll actually read this one. The previous iteration was Gmail add-ons with the cards user interface, if you will. And what's very nice with that is it was actually available for desktop and mobile. So in other words, you write a Google Apps script using this card mechanism for Gmail add-ons, and it will also work on the mobile versions of Gmail. G Suite add-ons add a number of new features and capabilities, including the ability to extend Gmail, Google Calendar, and Google Drive, all with a single add-on. So there's actually a migration, if you will, of going from what was known Gmail add-ons to G Suite add-ons. And G Suite add-ons, I kind of look at it this way. Let's say you have a website or a standalone product that runs in a browser. It's full featured, it solves problems, maybe it's a platform. And so what Google has done is in kind of like the very far right portion, they have these little icons to say, well, I'm a G Suite add-on. I can have one source of code that will say, hey, I recognize you're at Gmail. Let me see if I can do some integration with it. So you don't have to create another browser tab. So there's some little integration there. Or you could be on Calendar, or you could be in Google Drive, and they're going to expand this concept. But they're not going to get rid of editor add-ons. This is what we're going to zoom in on today. So the editor add-ons has been around for quite a few years. 6-ish, I guess. And so, as it says here, editor add-ons are the extend one of the Google Drive editor host applications like Sheets, Docs, Forms, and Slides. And of course, this is SheetsCon, so we're going to talk about Sheets. Before I leave those details of where all the documentation is, I did want to mention briefly about publishing. Some people are interested to say, I want to publish just within my organization or my domain. This presentation is already shared, so this link is active. And so what I'm recommending is to go there, consume, digest, and then hop on over to the Google Apps Script forum, which is basically a Google group. So that's where I want to leave it, instead of trying to spend an hour or two on just that topic. So I want to get to pro tips. All right, so I phrased the question, why add-ons, not custom menus? I believe Laura Taylor, in her workflow presentation today, she talked about creating a workflow and creating a custom menu. And I do it all the time as well. But there are certain use cases that we can actually solve a problem by using an add-on menu instead of the custom menu. And it's basically distribution, distribution, distribution. Just like in real estate, you have location, 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 but in this case, it's software distribution. So let's say you have a custom menu made by AppScript that does a whole bunch of stuff, but it starts with the menu. And that spreadsheet is acting as a template, which means, let's say this AppScript is contained, associated with a particular spreadsheet. Well, if that's supposed to be a template, then when you make a copy of that spreadsheet, you're also it also keeps and makes a copy of that AppScript code. So if this is done 10 or even 100 times, you now have a duplicate source code 100 times. But now, what if someone says, could you make a change, an enhancement, or fix a bug? Well, now you've got 100 instances of this duplicated source code that you have to update. Yes, there is a Google Apps Script API that you could take care of that, which we've done for customers, in fact, but it's not the preferred method. So in other words, using add-ons allows you to maintain one instance or one copy of the AppScript code. So that is solving the duplicate source code problem by going from custom menus to add-ons. Now there's another thing too. If you use a custom menu, it's possible for someone to go into the spreadsheet tools script editor to see the code. Well, okay, they can see it. Maybe it's in your organization. You say no big deal. It's within the family per se. But what if they get in there and they start hacking the code? Well, now it's broken, let's say, and you get a phone call, you get an email. Well, that increases your risk of being a high maintenance thing. So we don't want to get in this mode of increased support. So in this case, it's possible to switch over to an add-on menu and say, or then as a result of that, they cannot see they can't go into tools and script editor and actually see your code because it's an add-on. The add-on packages this much differently. So in other words, your code is protected. So how do you go from a custom menu to an add-on? Pretty straightforward. On the left, you have the custom menus has an on-open event, which is a simple trigger, and you see it there. On the right, all you have to do is to say, I need a function on install simple trigger that basically calls that on open statement. And then one other thing is that .create add-on menu, and that's it. Okay, I want to get into the pro tips. So first one is welcome and what's new dialogue. I'm going to show a little short video without audio in this case, but I'll narrate it to explain what this is. But let me just kind of go through it with this text first, if I may. All right, so for new users or when upgrades are made to your add-on, and you want a pop-up dialog window appear to welcome them or what's new in this version, that sort of thing. And you don't want that to display the second time they open up your add-on. In other words, if you did, that what's new message or welcome message could be very annoying each time you open the add-on. So what can we do to only display the welcome message or what's new once or whenever there is a new feature, control it? Well, there's a way of doing that, and I want to share it with you now. So the resources we're going to leverage is the property service. There's a few levels of that, and we're going to leverage on the script level and the user level. And we need the HTML service. So the overview is to display the What's New dialog only once per upgrade version. We will store a date value, but to be honest, it could be any string. It doesn't have to be a date value for the script, and a second value for each user, and then compare those dates. So in other words, at the script level is a value, and then at the user level. So they're not a one-to-one, it's one-to-many relationship in a sense, where you can have hundreds or thousands of users that has this unique code or this value. So we're just comparing the script level, which is one, versus all these individual user ones. So if the dates are not the same, then the What's New dialog appears and the user date value is updated with that same script date value. So they're both the same. So in other words, if they both contain, in this case, the same date, then we know that they've already looked at the welcome or What's New pop-up. Don't display it again. And if you do want to show a new What's New screen because you added some features, well, just go to the script editor and update the script property value natively, which I'm going to show you what I'm talking about on this next slide. So there should be no video, no audio. So here, what you see is click an add-on, right sidebar opens, and there's that welcome message or What's New pop-up. Okay, so now when we close this pop-up, which we'll do here in just a moment, and then close the right sidebar, and then reopen the add-on, now we don't want to see it. We only want to see it in that first open. And there it goes. So that's what we're talking about. So how does this work? Okay, within the script editor, you want to go to Files, Project Properties, then Script Properties, and add your unique key and date value. For example, for my Remove Blank Rows add-on, I use this RBR script version as the key, and I type in a string. In this case, it's a date value, but it could be anything. So I do that at the script level. Now, on the client JavaScript side, so in other words, in development, we typically have the browser front end, and then we have the server back end. So on the client side, where we're talking about JavaScript, basically Google provides a way to call from the client to server by using this google.script.run. So in this case, it's the new version function we're calling on the server side, and this is that function. And what we're doing is we're just basically getting the property service, we're getting the user portion and the script level, and then we're going to compare. So if they're not equal, that means we want to display the user pop-up. And so in this case, we say, okay, we've committed, we're going to do that with a show dialog. But before we do, we want to prevent it from popping up again. So let's go ahead and set the user property so it equals that script value. So now it was calling the show dialog, and this is where you have to leverage the HTML service because we want to have a pop-up dialog, and inside that dialog is HTML code. So we just basically do something like this. And then on the client side, again, we're talking about the pop-up inside is HTML code, and that's where you would enter your text of what's new, let's say. And typically you want to click to close instead of the X, but either one works. So the last point on this is a little visual to try to explain what I was describing before. You have a one instance script property for the entire add-on, even though you may have 100,000 users. So each user will have their own property, and that's why we're doing this comparison. There is quotas, and my last slide refers to quotas. So it is possible if you have a published add-on, and in that one day you have maybe, 50,000 or something like that, it could hit a max, but I haven't experienced that yet. So I guess it depends on how popular your add-on is. Okay, next tip. update add-ons instantly without republishing. I thought this is an interesting way of describing it. So a little background. When you create an add-on, and let's say it is for public consumption, it's available on the marketplace, well, you have to go through a new version, republish it. Google may want to slow things down perhaps to review it or send it right through. So I thought, is there any way, if I want to do something minor that's more data or text, similar to what we're talking about with the what's new instance. So yes, it is possible to do this. So let me go through some of this. So in the use case, you want to update content with the add-on, or you need to update script properties. Example, add some sort of anti-spam phrase. Well, the resources you need is the script properties once again. And the overview says, normally when you update your add-on, you must publish it, like I said before. And in some cases, Google may want to review it, which could slow things down. It might be not a few days, it could be just a day. But what if, in this case, it's urgent, right? What if there's a bad actor abusing your add-on and causing problems because it has some sort of output or integration with something? It's urgent to you to update maybe an array of phrases to say, no, they're not going to enter that again in my add-on. I'm going to shut them down. And there's a way of doing that. So the solution is to design your add-on to store some content within the property service at the script level. And then let's say your add-on has a bad actor, like I said before, misusing your add-on with inappropriate content or input. Well, your script could compare the bad actor's input with a list of inappropriate phrases stored within the script property level. Now, the pro tip is open your add-on source code using the script editor, update the script level property natively. In other words, you don't have to write a function, and you don't have to republish. You don't have to create a new version. So I just found that was very, very interesting to say, okay, I create a version, I publish it, and it's out there. Version upgrade, and all that. But in this case, it is possible to open up your source code and go into the script editor, update the script properties, and that's all you need to do. Now, I did make a note here, though. If you do use a function to update script properties, you should have it read like maybe an external spreadsheet with those new values that you want to put into that property storage. And then that way there's actually no coding. So that's my pro tip. I actually, this one is reuse video dialogue. Let me have another premise before it goes through this. Well, no, I guess the use case does describe it. Let me just read it. As a best practice, do not have your users open a new browser tab, like watching a how-to video for your add-on, because they may get distracted and not come back to your Google Sheet add-on. This could be important. Like, let's say you have a monetized add-on, and you don't want someone be distracted by opening up a new browser tab to accomplish something like watching a how-to video. So in this use case, throw another pop-up dialog, and inside of it, play a video. So in this case, we want to leverage that HTML service again. So in this example, let's say you have 3 how-to videos for your add-on listed in the add-on menu, and you want to have a pop-up dialog window to cover the sheet to play those select videos. Well, this is the solution. You want to have a function that is basically like this. So you want to have a function and a HTML file as your video container. And so we're passing in that URL here. And then within the video container HTML, again within script editor, you will have something like this, where, let's see, right here, this, let me go back, this YouTube URL is kind of passed in, and then that way you can have one video container.html file. In other words, if you're not using this technique, you're going to probably need a video container for each of your videos, but this is a smarter way of doing it. It's the tip. So here's kind of like a little visual, if you will. Here's an example that I did for a customer where the first how-to video is selected here. So the add-on menu opens here, and you click here, and then it opens up this dialog, and inside of it is the HTML, which actually is holding or containing the video from YouTube. So in the next slide, in this case, they select a different one. It's using that same video container and displaying it here. So again, less code, more efficient, and we're keeping everybody in the add-on and not leaving the browser window per se and getting distracted. Okay. Consider unique identifier instead of email addresses. This actually came up when I was doing an add-on for someone in the education space. And I've learned through some feedback, not just from that customer, but from outside sources, that some schools are very concerned about storing student email addresses. And at first thought, it's like, well, what are you talking about? I mean, if I'm going to associate things to a user, I always use the email account. You can go and get it, once they're signed in to their credentials. But in this case, what's the alternative? Well, these are a couple of ideas. And there's some assumptions and dependencies here, I guess. But you could have a spreadsheet. You could just say, I'm going to represent the student based on the spreadsheet ID. So this assumes there's one sheet per student. There's like no other students collaborating in that spreadsheet. So that works well for that use case. But if that's not the case, it's possible, and this is really interesting to me, there's a session.get temporary active user key, and that is defined as a temporary key that is unique to the active user but does not reveal the user identity. The temporary key rotates every 30 days and is unique to the script. Now, I will add something. When we leverage Stackdriver error logging, it also leverages this temporary active user key. So it's possible to trace the log to what you're doing perhaps in your code. So you can now identify the student with this temporary ID. In other words, what's more important is the association, not a specific email address. So that's what I'm trying to do here. So let's see, when the student becomes the user, instead of getting the Google account email, use either their spreadsheet get ID or this temporary key and store it as a substitute for their email. So the solution is, depending on the design and assumptions of the add-on, you may be able to protect the student's privacy by not storing their email. If the add-on is designed to have one student per sheet, then use the spreadsheet ID as the identifier. On the other hand, if multiple students can access the sheet, then you can try the temporary active user key. Just remember, the key rotates and replaces every 30 days, so you may have to handle that situation. Okay, so on this pro tip, there's more to add-on development besides just coding, right? So what I'm suggesting here is, let's be thoughtful when handling errors. So I want to go through an example to explain this. So after a lot of testing, you get reports or logs of errors, which is a bummer because you may spend weeks trying to break your own add-on and everything's fine. But when you publish it, you still get some errors. And you want to know if it is possible for the user to resolve this. And you want to inform the user through your add-on to reduce maintenance time. So in other words, instead of being notified either programmatically or a customer or internal person in your company notifying you it's broken, it's not working, because it's some generic error they're getting, I want to suggest that we use the try-catch method to wrap some code. And so in some cases, error messages are specific enough to research why the error occurred. And then we can take action to trap that error and display to the add-on user how to resolve the issue themselves, perhaps. So let's continue. So let's say your add-on opens a spreadsheet that you own and is used behind the scenes to get, let's say, a template, and is external to the user's organization. In other words, your add-on has some templates that it's perhaps in your drive, okay? and you simply want to get a copy. You want to open it and get a copy for the add-on user. So let me continue. You attempt to open it by using, let's say, the spreadsheet app and open by ID and whatever the ID is, but it fails. So this actually happened for one of our customers. So after some researching, you learn there is a G Suite admin setting that could prevent external file access. Now, when you design these things, when do you ever think of that, right? But when you're in the real world, you start learning more, and that's one of them. So knowing this, you can now wrap your code with like a try catch, and where you kind of sleep for, let's say, 200 milliseconds before you try again. But if it fails again, well, when this occurs, instead of just throwing a generic error message, you can inform the user with perhaps something like this. You could throw up a dialogue or right sidebar. You can say something like, contact your administrator and share this Google support page on how to whitelist our add-on, or your add-on, or use a consumer Gmail account. So in other words, in this particular use case, the user is within an organization, but someone went into their G Suite admin control panel and says you are not allowed to go outside of the domain to open a file. Well, here's an instance where you can communicate back through your add-on without you getting a phone call or email or help desk ticket to resolve this, perhaps. Now, this kind of leads into the other pro tip. So let's say you tested your add-on a lot, and again, there's no errors you found, and you publish it. However, occasionally you become aware that some lines of code actually fails, and you want to prevent this from recurring. So it kind of reduces your support or email inbox, let's say. Well, again, we're going to leverage this try catch using what's known as the exponential backoff method. So in some rare instances, you see calling these Google services, like it could be just spreadsheet app. It may fail. It's rare, but I have seen it. So when I think about the importance of the add-on, that could have more than 10 people, but maybe hundreds of thousands of people using it, or tens of thousands, it can become an issue. Rare sometimes can accumulate to a lot more accounts, right? So if there are just a few users, then like I said, there's no big deal. But if there's 100,000 users, then it can become time-consuming with support. So the solution is you want to wrap the code that's having the problem with a function that handles the try, catch, sleep, try again thing for a few times. So this is kind of basically known as the exponential backoff method. I have a very short, compact function that I found from Bruce McPherson, but he's now expanded that so it's more robust. So I have a link to that. So in other words, if you know that sometimes some lines of error or some lines of code errors out because it's attempting to call a Google server for a service like spreadsheet app, why not trap it and try again where we'll then have success? Because that's what I've been finding. So I'll wrap some important spreadsheet app things that's accomplishing in the add-on. And by me doing this exponential backoff where it tries 3 or 4 or 5 times, it usually succeeds after the second or third one. So now I get no error. Nothing's showing up in my inbox. No one's calling me. It's just solved. Okay. As we get closer to the end of these tips, one of the things I did want to bring to your attention is regulations. What's been trending and in a good way is protecting the end user. There's privacy concerns and so forth. I've even seen a regulation where I believe it was a US-based company that had some employees that work in Europe, and internally it didn't have a best practice or it violated some of these regulations from Europe's GDPR, and they got fined. So it's not just business to consumer. It could be business to business, actually. So I thought that was interesting. But in most cases, we are talking about business to consumer regulations concerns. So, so let's see. Some of these fines could be very hefty. So you could say, well, if I have an add-on, I could restrict who sees it in the marketplace by region. And if there's a particular group or countries that have heavy regulations, I could say, well, I just won't offer it there. I don't know. If that's the only reason, you may want to reconsider it, because this is a trending thing. In the state of California, United States, there's some more regulations that are needed to help to protect our individual users' privacy and things like that. So it's a thing that we just need to handle. So as far as resources, I would recommend that you check your local state and country, that you reside in, those regulations. You do want to note, though, if your add-on will be used outside of your country, then you will need to comply with the user's country. So in other words, you may live and breathe in the United States, but if you have customers or users who are using your add-on in Europe, it does apply to you. Now, I did team up with Martin Hosky to write a blog post around AppScript and add-ons when it comes to GDPR. So there's a link there for that. So I encourage you to see that. It's actually a couple parts to it. Then I also took notice when I was doing brief research on this point. Why not look at some documentation and some examples? Because you'll find in the regulations, a lot of it is written statements. So it's not just, am I providing a way for someone to download their information or delete them from our system. It's also what's written on your terms and policies. So I thought, why not go to Google's link here to see a good example. So review the resources above and revisit your add-on to determine if more features or capabilities are actually needed. So regardless, you most likely will need to produce written terms and policy statements on the add-on website, or maybe it's an information tab within your add-on itself. Add-ons, things, because it would take an all-day thing, quite frankly. But I do want to leave you with some other things. So let's go through these. Google does provide add-on support pages when you need assistance. So there's a link for that. I do recommend highly to join the AppScript forum, which is basically a Google group, because it is active with a lot of friendly experts where Googlers participate at times as well. And that is the direct link to it. Known add-on bug. Oh, yes. There's been a bug that's been around for, I guess it's getting close to 2 years, if not already 2 years. And I just want to describe this to you to help with your troubleshooting. So it affects all add-ons and perhaps web apps as well. Let's say I have a consumer account that I've signed into, and I've also signed in to my domain account, my business account. So I'm actually signed in multiple times. Well, if the first sign-in, known as the primary, is not the one used when I installed some add-on, then it can produce an error and the add-on won't work. So the solution is to inform that user about this. Maybe simplify it by saying, sign out of all your login accounts, sign in with the account that you use to install the add-on, and then it should work. And there's a nice article here that talks about it more in depth with a workaround. Other resources. Now, I'm thinking about like debugging. So let's say something is not working anymore. There are certain steps you can take, and Google recommends some for troubleshooting. Another thing that you need to consider is quotas. Like I mentioned in that previous pro tip, you should click on that link to become aware of what the quotas are. And some of these quotas really depend on what level that you're in. If you have a consumer account, your quotas are most likely less. If you are a G Suite business, it increases, and if you're all the way up to enterprise, it's probably even higher quotas. So you should be aware of that. So let's say something breaks. You may make the assumption, like I do all the time, what's wrong with my code? Was it some unexpected input I wasn't expecting? Well, you really should double check to see if there's an outage by Google itself. So there's a couple ways of doing that. There's an AppScript service outage log, as well as the G Suite status dashboard. So the G Suite status dashboard is more popular because let's say there's a drive problem that lasts 15 minutes or even an hour or two. Well, if you're starting to get reports of a problem with your add-on, you may want to say, oh, there was a problem with Drive. My add-on uses Drive. What's that time window? Are they in sync? Yes. So it's probably not my code. So why spend hours trying to figure out what's wrong with my code when it was just in service? Other resources. Yes, Martin Hosky created AppScript Pulse. That's gaining memberships as well as nice articles. So there may be some Medium posts that are found that are brought into this and other such things, and even videos. So I encourage you to become a member there. Now at SW Gaps, I actually have a web page I want to expand on to help people as well. Let me see. Let me go here real quick. Zoom in. So there's support help page. There's the community I was talking about. There's an old add-on G Plus community that you can still activate if you are a domain user. And the issue tracker that I was talking about, here's a link that filters all known bugs, fixes, feature requests, ones are signed, ones are fixed. And that's what I wanted to share with you there. Let's see. Add-on monetization. This was interesting. Just before this session today, we had the roundtable sessions, and one of them was Google Apps Script, and someone happened to ask me about monetization. I said, well, you caught me at a good time. Let me update my presentation before it starts. So for those who are interested of any questions that you may have with monetizing your add-ons, I recommend this link where we recorded a totally unscripted episode that I did there. And there's an add-on that I participated in called Text G Blaster. And what's interesting about that, before we go to the last slide here, I had a former customer that I did work for that was around texting, kind of like an Uber-like thing. And then I had this idea, why don't I write an add-on that sends bulk outbound messages, like a one-way street, right? You can't really reply to it. And so I thought about getting this this previous customer to join in a partnership, and we did. And we did it part-time. We created this thing, and we never met each other in person. It was all remote. Never shook hands, but we opened up a bank account that we share, and we maintain it and do customer service. And after 5 years, we just recently met. So it's an interesting story in and of itself. So that's a featured add-on that you can check. And it's actually only available for US and Canada, because when it comes to texting in some other countries, it's a little bit more regulated and a little bit more difficult. So thanks. And with a couple other last thoughts before we go into the questions. So again, my company, we provide G Suite support services, training, and product development. And the best way to contact us is just going to the website. There's a contact form. And I wanted to do a little promo, if I may. Since I'm opening up this training division this year, I wanted to offer a discount for anyone who mentions SheetCon. And so if you ever need webinars, custom webinars, or you want some consulting and you want the answer recorded so you can play it back over again, you can do that. And we also offer on-site in-person training at your organization. So that'll be 20% discount. And I am planning to host a G Suite automation conference in the fall. I did something similar to that just last month, and we'll be a combination of in-person regionally here. Of course, you can always fly into sunny Florida if you like, but we'll also have it online or digitally. And that is it.
Hi, Steve.
Yes.
Let me just bear with me one moment.
Sure.
There we go. Thank you. Thanks for that. Those pro tips there. There was really some great information. I was sitting there imagining that it's taken you years to build up that knowledge. As you said, you just don't think of these things just spontaneously. It's really only when you put things out in the real world there that you bump into these edge cases, and
Yes.
that hard-won knowledge that you were talking about. So Thank you very much for sharing all those pro tips there. That was great.
Yes.
Folks, I've got some questions here for Steve, and we still have time. If you have anything you want to ask Steve, put it there in the sidebar for us quickly. I can see one has just come through here, so let me just make a note of that quickly. So Steve, let me fire away with a couple of questions.
Let's see if I can answer any of them.
So Jesse asked about publishing his very first add-on, just as an individual without resources. It seems like it's a pretty convoluted, complex process. Google needs a lot of things like a privacy policy and image rights and all sorts of things that maybe you wouldn't think about just as a solo developer.
Yes. Yes. So like I said in my presentation, if I went down the road to go through all this, we wouldn't have enough time. Once you start peeling back the onion, you just keep going. So that's why I kind of ticked and defaulted, or the phrase of kicking a punt in football, whatever. But I defaulted to the documentation and the nice active support Google Apps Script form that we have. But you are correct. They do want more professionalism. Going back a few years with scripts and add-ons, it was more lax. But now they really want you to have a domain to publish this thing from and things like that. And let's see, we got a few minutes. I would just say Google does care, especially when there's other regulations that we're talking about users' privacy. Some of those things are considered as, what are you doing with your add-on? How invasive are you? So they've picked Gmail as one of those things, and Google Drive. So they have sensitive scopes, as they call them, of how invasive you're going. And then the really higher one is restricted scopes. So depending on what add-on you're doing, you may want to review that portion of the documentation, because you may realize if I do Gmail app instead of mail app, I may have to go through an audit process that could cost me tens of thousands of dollars. So something to look at.
Yeah, definitely. It is a very confusing process. So I think you mentioning there that the community group and being involved there and asking questions and asking for help is the best way to find people who've recently gone through that process and can maybe ease that pain a little.
Yep.
So then we had a question actually. Let me read it out and see if we can figure this one out. So when publishing an add-on, what are the considerations for choosing the publishing account that you publish under? So whether it's like your Gmail account, whether you should set up a domain, and then whether you use your personal email address or you set up a generic support address, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I would say try to have a domain that you own, which is part of the requirement for hosting some of the documentation now, instead of trying to do things on the consumer side. And when it comes to publishing, there's another can of worms there, right? It's like, well, I can publish just to myself. I can unlist it and share the link because it's not in any store. This visibility thing can help me to only publish it within my domain. Admin people who are controlling your organization, this G Suite admin control panel, they can actually whitelist. And how that works is, let's say some people in your organization says, I want that add-on, and it's becoming popular. And they have this restriction to say, well, we're vetting them all. So that go through a vetting process. And then it's possible for the admin to say, I'm going to push this add-on to all of our 10,000 users in our organization. And so then it'll be available when they click add-ons and they'll see it. Once they click it, they may still have to do one more installation thing, but that's how that works.
Yep. Okay, nice. A question from Daniel was, has the transition from Rhino to V8 affected the add-on development process? And what about your own experience with that as well?
Sure. So in theory, it's supposed to be smooth and no problems. When we go from one engine to the faster, better, later version, the V8, there are some other more specific, restrictions, if you will. Like if I had a variable called class, I can't have class with V8 because that's a reserved word, right? And some people are reporting using global variables. So Google has provided a very nice migration to say, look for these things before you republish. I mean, have it convert over to V8, go through that list to see if there's anything I need to review and replace. Another one is the use of undefined. Instead of returning undefined, it actually returns null, I think I saw. And
okay, that could change the code.
Yep. And one more thought, if I may, the issue tracker. That's where people actually log problems. And so it's possible to go to the issue tracker to see if there is a V8 related problem that may concern you.
Yep.
So it's a wishy-washy answer. So it is possible. I think Google has shared that most scripts, believe it or not, aren't very long.
Yep.
And so therefore, there's really no concern about it migrating. But if you do have a very long, thousands of lines, then that's when you need to go and do your due diligence.
Yeah. I think I've noticed a few in some of the help forums, actually, some people saying that add-ons have broken. And it was to do with the scopes they were requesting, where Google, I think, are just being a little tighter now, where before maybe if you requested 5 scopes but only used 4, you could just get away with it. But now Google are calling you out for that scope that you've requested but not actually then used at all in your code. And so I think that's caught out some people.
I'm not aware of that one yet, but again, the process would be submit it as a bug in the issue tracker, and then Google will tell us, no, that's intended. Or
they give you back some good feedback, I think, actually, on and help you find those bugs.
And they have the star process too. You can star these issues to get more attention.
Yeah. Okay, cool. We had another question, actually, Steve, as well, that came through that was, can you just talk a little bit about the difference between publishing as an add-on versus a web app? And do they have that? Do they both avoid that duplication issue with the code?
Oh, well, let's see. With web apps, they are independent, standalone. They're not contained or associated with. In this case, we're talking about spreadsheets.
Yeah.
So there won't be that duplication of code problem.
Yeah.
In that case.
Yeah, and I think of it as sort of the web app is its own one single thing that lots of people can look at the exact same one.
Yeah.
The add-ons it's like a clone across 10,000 spreadsheets of your one source code. But it's, each person has their own installation of that one. But as you said, I loved your distribute. That's if you're wondering whether you need an add-on, that's your answer there is, does it need to propagate out to a lot of people? Then think about doing an add-on for sure. Is it a script that you use and your one other colleague maybe uses? Then it's probably overkill to go down that add-on route.
In fact, we actually had a customer that they said, hey, we're leveraging G Suite, a lot of spreadsheets, Google Drive, and create our own little microsystems, which is good. They're leveraging what they bought. But they had this duplication problem. And so we had to, in the short term, use the app script API to update all those copies for them as we then replaced them with add-ons. So there's a temporary measure you could take.
Definitely a temporary measure, though, because I can imagine that gets pretty painful as well. But certainly I've found myself tripped up years ago when I was learning all this. I'd shared a script in a sheet with various people, and then I needed to make a change to that. And suddenly, like you say, you've got 5 or 6 or 10 other copies floating around in the world. You need to go and hunt down and make that same change, which obviously is a crazy way to work and would drive you mad. Okay, great. Well, Anything else, Steve, that you wanted to mention at all before we wrap up?
Nope, I think that's good.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And thanks again for sharing those pro tips. I'm sure they are going to save some people some painful some pain along the way there, having to learn it the hard way. So thanks, Steve, for coming today. Folks, I'm going to just switch off the live stream momentarily for a couple of minutes. I'm going to come back at 5 p.m. With just a last presentation for sort of 10 or 15 minutes, just to wrap up SheetsCon. So don't go anywhere. Just go grab yourself a quick drink and come back for the finale and the wrap up of SheetsCon. And thanks again, Steve. And we'll see you all in a moment.